call the meeting to order. We'll give our clerk a minute to get back to where she can call the roll.
Member Circus. Member Andrew.
Present.
Member Cole Smith. Present. Member Cornell.
Here.
Member Hart. Member Wilson. Member Miller Jones. Member Dickinson. Member Snyder here. Member Plumley here. And Member Clark here.
Any member of the public wishing to be heard needs to complete a virtual or physical comment card, and that needs to be presented to the clerk of the trust prior to the start of the meeting. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on a single subject matter that's submitted on their comment card prior to the start of the meeting, and the clerk of the court will function as our official timekeeper, just to remind everyone that we did change our rules so that at this point only people who are physically present are able to make comment. Though we are happy to receive email comments prior to the meeting, and anything received prior will be shared with board members so that we know what the public is thinking and wishing us to be aware of. A quorum of the board is physically present. We are able to determine an extraordinary circumstance that would allow other board members to participate by electronic means. If the board makes such a finding, then the board member or members that are attending by teleconference means they can participate and vote. But such a finding of an extraordinary circumstance may be made only by resolution or by single motion. I don't believe we have any indication that there is an extraordinary circumstance, so therefore only those physically present may vote. Although, is Dr. Hart on? All right. I was going to say, is Dr. Hart at lower court? Judge Miller Jones is not either. So we don't have any, so that would not apply. All right. So moving on, the next item for approval would be an agenda review, revision, and approval, including the consent agenda items. I'm not aware of any changes to the agenda that are included. Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Question.
Yes, sir.
So I received, or I got the submission number 29, which was Dr. Sunshine Moss's email, which has a public comment submitted. I gave some really good points actually that we can talk about later. But it just raised a question for me: were there 28 submissions that I missed, or just like what's number 29? What is that?
Actually, if you want to answer that, then go ahead and answer.
Submission number 29.
Right, so this started at the beginning of the website, so it's going to be.
Okay, got it. So that's year to date, not for this meeting.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Otherwise, all in favor of the agenda and consent agenda approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Do we have general public comment? Ken, did you want to bring that item up?
Yeah. So like I said, I thought Dr. Sunshine Moss made two really good points that I got, which was the request that the board not approve the timeline. Talk about that when we get to it. I like the comment there as far as making sure we have enough time. And the second one was she requested that the board reconsider limiting community participation in meetings to only in person or via comments online. I will tell you that I heard the school board was doing something, maybe Superintendent Andrew can update us. The county is doing a test tomorrow at our county. And we've gone to just online comments, essentially. I mean, just in-person comments. And what the county has set up is this technology through Zoom, where they have created a Zoom meeting within a Zoom meeting. We're going to try it out tomorrow. And I'll kind of report, we'll see how that goes, but that's an opportunity to allow for the public to Zoom in or dial in and then be put into the meeting for public comment. I don't know about participating after a motion. I think that's maybe what the school board doing, so I appreciate Dr. Moss's comment. If the technology can prove itself, then I'll be ready to change kind of my opinion on that. I do want the public to participate, have the ability to participate, but I don't want to give a false sense that the public has the ability to participate, and then when they try to,
Well, they can't hear what they're.
or they can't hear. And so until we work out that technology, that would be my only comment to that public.
So that brings us to my report, and I've got just a couple items. We had a total of 25 applications that came through for the executive director position. And Ms. Howard, with James Moore, Rackham, the county, and I reviewed them and checked off the ones that we thought met the educational experience, in terms of years since education, but also that experience in management and those kinds of activities that were in the key skills and abilities for the job description. We all agreed it was a pretty brief call that only 8 of the applicants met those full criteria, and all of those have now received a pre-screening to complete. And those are due back to us by June 3rd, and we will have a meeting on June 8th that will be publicly noticed to review those. And in the meantime, we're going to agree on for each of the pre-screening questions what it is we're looking for in the answers, so that when we evaluate them, we're working off of the same set of expectations. And then from there, we will look to the top 3 to 5, depending on how those pre-screens look. And at that point, we'll be coming back to the board with, okay, well, how do we want to structure the interview process and time frames for doing that? But I mean, everything right now is running on time. We had some very good applications, so I think we're going to be in good shape to have a good pool from which to pick. But the resumes all kind of shook out into, he's clearly qualified and clearly not. So it was not a difficult slice. The other thing that is in your packet, and somebody's always said, what is this? So Grace Groves Community Engagement Toolkit. This is just a resource that I thought, especially for the community listening and what we were going to be doing in terms of the strategic plan process, would be very useful. It's a toolkit that was developed, funded through the Partnership for Reimagining Gainesville. These folks have been developing a community engagement grassroots, how to really use community members and stakeholders to develop programs and services and things to address community identified consensus needs, which seems like a lot of what we are interested in hearing and doing. And it just literally, I was on the evaluation committee that looked at the project. It's been funded for about a year, and they're really working on this toolkit. There's still some pieces missing from it. They're still working to develop, but it's a really nice framework. So I thought it would be a useful strategy, not just for the strategic planning committee, but also for Liz and her folks as they start to do more of that community engagement work. So that's the only reason that's good there. And then one final announcement is that we have been notified that Judge Laura Jones will be rotating off, and Judge Denise Burrell will be taking her place in June. So I expect that we will see Judge Burrell at our first June meeting. And that is all I have unless anyone has any questions for me. If not, executive director report.
Just a couple things that I wanted to mention as it relates to our audio. We have ordered the owl. It has arrived. Internally, we have played around with it and can't quite figure it out. So we have put a ticket in for the county to assist us with setting up the owl so that we can begin using it and determine if it will solve some of our audio issues. We also have a meeting scheduled with Mark over at the county to get some additional support about what things may or may not work. And I believe that meeting is this week or next week. I can't quite remember right at the moment. So I did want to let you all know that we have a call into Howard Technology to determine Once we figure out what we want to do about our audio, figuring out if we can send, return those items, if there's going to be a fee for, reshelving, if I think the term is used. But we are looking into that so that I can report that back to the board. Also, the last time we met, we talked about the CFO position, and so I have started receiving sample job descriptions from the other CSCs to begin reviewing so that we can make a determination about the CFO or director of finance position, and so that we can start looking at that. We have interviews taking place in the next couple of weeks for the program specialist position. And then I am working with Katie, our HR consultant, on attempt so that we can get an individual in here to start supporting Nicole with, the finance department and everything that comes with that. Nicole is wearing 3 hats, 4 hats, sometimes. And so I think it is just time that we give her the help that I think she deserves to have. With that being said, before that, I have asked Nicole to give you all a quick update on where we are with the audit process.
As of the end or mid to end of last week, the financial statements have been sent to Purpose Gray, and they are in the process of reviewing them. I received an additional request for some more backups, which I forwarded today. So they're reviewing all of the information, and
And I got the standard questionnaire on fraud.
oh yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so that's already awesome.
yes.
I said there wasn't any.
Yes, we're at the point now, I'm just responding if they find that they need more detail. And then they'll schedule an on-site review.
And then,
Thank you. All right, committee updates. I think Ms. Twombly.
Okay, so we have our first meeting scheduled for the full steering committee coming up this Wednesday, 5/25 at 11 a.m. I'm excited about that. And Christy and I have been working diligently the past couple of weeks on getting the draft of the listening project scope and the IPN written. And I believe that went out today to the committee. So I'm sorry it's so last minute. It was a lot of work and a lot of back and forth. And I appreciate Catherine for her input and Bonnie for her input. It was really good comments. So I think we've got a good draft to start with, but I'm very interested in hearing what the rest of the committee would like to add, the lead, edit. I think we've just got the basis of it, and we'll do that on Wednesday. And when I was looking at Dr. Moss's comments, I think she submitted them at the beginning of the last meeting, so she may not have seen the updated timeline. I'm hoping that alleviated one of her concerns, at least, because I did appreciate one of her comments was to hold the listening project for 1 month over the summer. We wouldn't have really good engagement. And based on the updated timeline that we've done, we actually are going to start the listening project in September, and it'll run September and October. So it'll be a 2-month, which is still a pretty big project to run over 2 months. But again, what we're trying to do is to get these comments in place, hear from the community on what they want to, how they would like to have their voice heard in our process, and then be able to use those comments as part of our strategic planning. So it's really to get everything in place before we start any of our strategic planning. So I'm excited to see that process move forward. Once we get the final version of the scope and the IPN, I'm trying to think of when that will go out. In August, that will be great. No, in June, we're planning on releasing the IPN, and then in July, we will select the contractor so that everything's in place, so that in August, they'll be doing all their prep work, getting ready to put together how they're going to conduct the project, and then September, October will be the listening project. Any questions? Questions, comments?
I'm sure. I think Dr. Moss was thinking that the ITN was the list, and we're putting out the ITN, and I think a lot of the impact or the input from the community will be largely determined on what that contractor says back to us. And I think if we insist that they make sure that the community has both the time, the space, and the opportunity to give us the feedback, then maybe 2 months is enough time. But if we need to add a month, or depending on how they're proposing that they do that, I'm open to that, but I don't think we need to decide that today. I think the ITN that we get back, invitation to negotiate, which is their proposal to us as to what they propose they do to engage in the public. If we don't think it's enough, then at that time we negotiate back and say we need more or less. And so I think the discussion and her points are well taken, but until we get some proposals back from different people, I'm not ready to say 2 months is enough time, and I don't know. It may be plenty of time, but we may need to add to that. And I would rather delay the strategic plan a month or two, and that process in order to hear from the community fully and try to rush through that. So,
And I do think that part of why we try to keep it fairly broad, because we really wanted the experts to tell us how they would accomplish it and what kind of time frame it would be. Because that was one of the things we discussed with people. We wanted that done. Yeah, that's the key. Why go through this whole process if we're not going to get a really good listening project now? So I'm in agreement. If someone were to come down and they have the best ideas for putting it together and set it would take 3 months, I think that would be something we bring back to the board.
Other questions, comments? If not, our presentation on the budget, proposed budget. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have? We have a public comment. We have a public comment. Normally, we don't take them unless it's a voting item, but Candace, sure.
This is for Cheryl. But, just before I left the house to come here, I got a slew of things in an email. Are any of those the ITM?
It is part of it. There's a lot of extra. So I think we sent examples of other projects that have done in different service boards. So we sent the examples of other listening projects as well as the draft IPN and the draft scope. So that's really, focus on that first, and then if you want to read the other examples, there's some other good examples that we try to share as well.
I'm not very good at being able to read anything presented.
Yeah. That's what we try. We would have loved to have had it out last week. It's just been so much. So 2 days, I know 2 days is not a lot of prep work, but hopefully not.
It's okay for me, may not be other people that are working.
Thank you.
Thanks, Candace. All right, presentation. Which one of you guys? I'm okay with that. It is both of us.
Right, so we have prepared for you, and I'll try to speak loudly in case we have some participants on Zoom, so that everyone can hear as much as possible. But what we have prepared is the 2022-2023 proposed budget for CTAC. And I'll start with a review of the calendar. A review of the calendar so that we have an idea of what it is that we are trying to achieve and what we are following. So according to our bylaws, the proposed budget has to be presented to the board in May. And internally, our process starts with a request and discussion with the staff about different, not only programs that we're interested in, but also other operational needs that we need to run smoothly here at the trust. What memberships do we need? What trainings do we need to include in the budget? What conferences are we required to attend or need to attend based on what it is we're working on, whether it's our statewide association, whether it's contract management conferences or memberships or training, different trainings and memberships that Bonnie is interested in participating in. And so we start internally with looking at requests and what we need to include with the budget. And there's a form that Nicole has created that all the staff utilize to submit that information back to she and I, and then that's when we also look at programs and create the budget. June 1st is the date where we will receive the property tax value from the Alachua County Property Appraiser's Office. And so when I present the actual numbers to you, it is an estimate. It is what Nicole and I, with the conversation with Todd, think we will be receiving through our property taxes. And we know that we believe, the three of us, that it is slightly lower than what we may actually get, but those are the numbers that we have utilized. Also, I'll note that after that June meeting, we will then present a tentative budget to the Board of County Commissioners. I'll note also in our calendar, you'll see that we cannot have our meetings on the dates that the school district has their hearing meetings, as well as the county commission. And Commissioner Cornell and Superintendent Andrew, if you notice that those dates are off, please let us know, but we did get those from the website. Our actual hearing meetings are scheduled in September, and you'll find those within the calendar as well. I'm talking, but not very nice. There we go. All right, so I just went over the calendar. So we have three funds that we look at when we are looking at our revenue. We have our general, which is tax revenue, which I'll be able to show you those numbers. We have our special revenue, and that consists of our Pritzker Children's Initiative, that grant, that is where you will find the dollars that come from Pritzker, as well as any interest that we have earned. And then we have our capital project as well. Now, this proposal does not include any additional dollars for capital. We already have $1 million that is set aside for capital to purchase a building. So once we start to look at that actual budget, you will not see any additional dollars requested for that. However, the board can request that we add additional dollars to that area as well. So this, in your booklet, you have several pages within your booklet. What I have decided to do, and it would be great to get additional feedback from the board about what exactly it is you want. Does this work? Does this not work? I have decided that I would use this actual document here from the booklet, and I believe it is the second to last page in your booklet. It's right before the programs page. And so I'll go over our revenue section first. We have our taxes coming in at $8.7 million. We will not receive any intergovernmental revenue. Back in 2021, we were then getting the CARES dollars. And that is why we don't have any governmental dollars that we are receiving for revenue in 2023. Under the miscellaneous revenue, those are going to be your Pritzker dollars. And I'll note here that we are within our 2023 will be our last year receiving the Pritzker dollars. And that funding last year was about $88,000, $83,000, and those funds are being cut. Like most grants, they start to wean you off slowly, and so this third year, you'll notice that we're only getting about $46,000, and we'll continue to support that program with our funding as we have been the last several years of getting the Pritzker dollars. And then in fiscal year 24, we will roll that position. We'll propose to roll that position into our full budget that we are covering. And then you have other sources, and our other sources consist of the fund balance so that we can meet our budget.
So that says you're proposing using almost 1.4 million fund balance.
That is correct. And we'll be able to answer some additional questions about that. With those one-time uses. For our expenditures, we have our personnel services. This personnel does include the 2 new FTEs and filling that lead finance position, that CFO position. This also includes any salaries and benefits for the additional positions. And that number increased significantly because what we did was we decided to look at those numbers at the highest total we could, because we just aren't sure what the final salaries will be. We aren't sure what they will select as it relates to benefits. And so for budget purposes, we decided to go with the highest number. For operating expenses, what's included in that is our contracts with our consultants, our audit, our insurances, as well as bond policies, as well as meeting software. And then again, as a reminder, for capital, we are not requesting any additional dollars for capital, as we have $1 million set aside.
Does any IT purchasing for a data system, is that capital? And if so, why
Go ahead. It would go underneath the one-time purchase. We've allocated about 25,000 for infrastructural purpose. Well, that's not the software itself, that's just the IT people. But yes, we can increase that number.
I think that's a concern of mine, that we have an adequate IT system and a data system. And I know that those have short depreciation schedules because everything software has like 3 to 5, but
The 25 is just for the installation of it, not the software or the actual process.
licenses.
Correct. We set aside 50,000 a couple years ago. There's an additional 80,000 in for systems such as SAMUS would be an excellent example of a data system as it relates to programmatic RFPs for providers to submit their information. We've included qualitative software, surveying software, and so that was a lot of information that we received provided to make sure that we had the necessary software. So those dollars are.
So is that in operating? Where is it in the first? Okay, so you've got it as an operating expense rather than a capital.
So, we had a conversation with Todd, and he said it didn't go in capital. And he said
Everybody gets it slightly different rules. Yes. I just want to make sure it's there.
yes.
How much is that? 25 and 58?
130 and 25.
130, so 58 is 130 plus 10.
That right, Chris?
And the initial cost for getting the software will be more than going.
Right.
But the ongoing cost is usually less.
We have a maintenance
you know, when you first get into the development.
And then I also wanted to mention, talked about the capital, and then we talked, the grants and aid, that's where I left off. So with grants and aid, in your booklet, you'll notice that the total programming funding is $6,331,000. So that is, that reflects our current programming that we are funding. The board discussed extending and renewing contracts that we're currently funding. The only programs that you won't see in that funding is the capacity. The dollars are still there. You'll see $300,000 unallocated there. That is where that $300,000 was this current year allocated for capacity contracts. But we did leave that funding in programming to utilize it for additional services. We also have match dollars and including sponsorships and for the fiscal year 2023. It also breaks down for you the programming based on goal as well as strategy. And I'll take questions. Nicole and I will take questions. Nicole and I have worked on this budget for the last couple of weeks, and you know, I just want to publicly thank Nicole as well as Ashley, Bonnie, who helped us with some of the graphics, and even the staff. While I am wearing two hats, that means some staff aren't being as supervised as that maybe they would like to, the guidance, especially from the programs team. And so as we are wearing multiple hats, I think it's just important to note that a lot of the staff are going above and beyond while Nicole and I and Ashley and I are working on trying to get the budget to be able to be presented to you all in the time again. But at this time, I'll take any questions if you guys may have questions.
Commissioner Cornell, and then
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, the number on the bottom of other uses, 1.235 million. What is that? It's right underneath the programming dollars, granting and
So that consists of about $485,000, which represents about 5% for reserves.
Okay.
And then it's also $750,000 that should not be there. It really should say of $485,000. And as Nicole and I are navigating New World, we realized today that $750,000 that was allocated for the building last fiscal year is showing up in that line item.
Okay, so it could, all right, so it could be capital outlay 750 if we're buying the building. You just move it up. But it's $750,000 of expenditures that are not in programming, operating. Okay, that's
that's, we're going to confirm that with Ron.
that makes sense. I mean, I knew the 5% reserve was in that number. So that's good. That's 750,000. But fund balance kind of taken it off. On the revenue, the top number, 8.743. So what that looks like is Todd is saying estimate a 6% increase in that.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's going to be closer to 9. So that would be another 250,000 to the top line maybe. My real only comment is on my favorite sheet, which is the page over. Y'all know what I'm talking about, program funding? Yeah. So when I look at that, I look at our goals, I scratched off to the side that we should be talking about how can we expand the little guys and how can we put more money into the two priorities of safety and support, the bottom two. And so in my simple brain, I think if we're gonna do 4.6 million for goal 2, it would be nice to have $1 million for the top one and $1 million for the bottom 2. So I get in my head 4.6, 1 million, 1 million, 5.6, 6.6 in program funding. Now, where we spend those funds, I have no idea. But I think we need to think about increasing those 2 categories. 300,000 up top, which we could use unallocated, and about 500,000 down below. That's my initial thought.
I think we get on to Mr. Nicholson and Dr.
Okay.
And good job.
Ladies first, Dr. Postma.
I have a question. I know that each year there are always programs and funds set aside for those families who are at, below the poverty line. And I'm always concerned about the group of people that we call the near poor. You know, not poor enough to qualify for a lot of programs and resources, but not rich enough to pay, you know, for all the other programs. And so I'm always thinking about the people here who can pay, the people at the bottom who will always get support, but the person who's the near poor who's struggling. My question is, do you have some funds or some resources or a category to help those people who were identified as the near poor?
So I think of 2 different opportunities, resources for those families. One, we're funding, and that is the service that they can receive from the family resource centers. Because many of those families are receiving services there. And then one other resource that I think, but through these listening sessions, I think we will learn more, is that these families could really benefit from childcare slots. They make either too much to receive early learning, or not quite enough. And so they fall between the gaps. And I think when we start to see families and these wages increase, many of those families are going to no longer receive the early learning slots from the Early Learning Coalition. That is something that we have not looked into yet, but it's a conversation that Mia and I have started having with the Early Learning Coalition because we have match dollars. And our match funding might be an opportunity for us to help those families with early learning slots, because those children, the family is either going without to pay for early learning, or the children are not in any early learning slot, based on what we can tell right this moment. So that is where I would like to see the route the trust takes continue to fund the family resource centers throughout Alachua County. There are 3 here, and then our contract with Partnership for Strong Family expands it to some of our rural areas. And then potentially working with the Early Learning Coalition, because she cannot, with her dollars, fund families that make more than 150% of the federal population.
I think that Dr. Colson is making a very, very, very important point. And I think, I know you're aware that there's a lot of work going on right now in Tallahassee around early learning, around needs tested programs, including child care, but also work that the Federal Reserve and the Herman's involved with looking at benefit flips and trying to figure out this dynamic that is more than income, right, that affects eligibility and needs tested programs, including the ELC. And so I think the more we can gather information about those issues and think about how we might support families in the short term and the long term, but also make sure we're talking to Herman and others about how to get some of these messages up to Tallahassee as well.
Chris, thank you. And thank you for talking to me for part of me. It looks like, and here's where the answer was, with this, between the operational and the intergovernmental revenue and all those different categories, it looks like we're spending about 100 to 200,000 more than we're taking in as far as the money. So the number looks a lot larger than what it is, but as you go through and with the capital amount of 750 to a million, the other uses, which is the reserves, we're only about 100 to 200,000 over, which is not better than what it looked like when I first looked at it. One of the things that I'm curious about is you say you want to bring a couple people on because of what's going on with financing in the county. What would we save from what we're paying in finance, in accounting services now? You have that kind of information did you use some sort of number, that we subtract something from that because we'll be doing some of it in-house? Getting on again, because if you can't answer it, that's fine.
We can pull that information as the co-pays.
Okay. The contract that we have with CRI was for 160. And we are rapidly going through those funds.
Yeah.
And that takes into consideration, yes, we have a learning curve and they're getting up to speed, but they're still not doing all of the job duties that we need at the trust. And their expertise is very welcome, but we are in the priority with all of their other clients, which a lot of times, as you all know, you can't keep waiting for things to be done because we have our own deadlines and reporting. We try to go outside and it doesn't seem to be working like we had hoped it would. So the decision to bring it back in, so we actually have someone who is personally vested in the success of the organization is the way we want to kind of go back.
So did you reduce the operating expenses
That's my question. Is, did
in
y'all
the
reduce-
budget to account for the, so you upped the
Yes,
personnel
yes,
expense to account
yes.
for the TFTB?
That was one of the ones.
Versus did you bring down the operating costs from reducing or eliminating that contract shortly into the year?
I estimated about 80,000 to get from September to December because I would like them to finish FY 22, including closing it, and getting that
For
information.
next year's budget,
Correct.
did we reduce did we take out the 169 to
Oh,
to
yes,
CRI?
yes, I'm sorry, yes, yes.
Right.
And then we added it into personnel, right?
And how much were the additional personnel costs?
I estimated very high. I estimated at 110 for the CFO, and I estimated at 76 for the next finance
I
person.
think that's well within the chicken.
So it's comparable to what we end up paying Carver.
I would say it's probably going to be a little more than what we're paying CRI, especially with your own benefits.
So the way we've been, I guess, with the checks that we sign, you can see how much we're paying.
Yes,
And
that's scary.
it looks like it's going to be more than what the contract was, so it's going to be complicated. The personnel and operating costs that we have, I know that you look for some sort of percentage of how much that is in relation to the overall budget, and as some sort of comparison, how we're doing with that. I don't know what the baseline is, but whether it's 10% or 20% or what that number is, but
There isn't. It's a small organization, so their
Right,
admin
right.
rate's going to be higher than we've got a bigger one. So if you're looking at Miami, all the staff, they're likely to have an admin rate that's probably somewhere around 15%. But if you start to get. Right, so yeah, the smaller you are, the bigger your share of admin. So the fact that we're at 13, it's like, I consider that stuff.
then what are you putting in the 13? But that's personnel is, personnel and operating, what you actually calculate.
Oh, I like that 1.3.
change.
I mean, that includes.
That's
other
the,
portions.
right.
That's not necessarily have one.
Okay, I just be mindful, but, just to see how do we stack up? I know there's another, children's services organization that's comparable, that's been established for a while.
We can get that information for you.
You know, and I don't want you to go, how do we just a ballpark, because I just want to see for basic comparison.
And just make sure you're calculating what goes into operating and what, because different people put different things in different budget categories. Just saying.
And, you know, as we go into the strategic plan, a couple things about the strategic plan. You know, when we're looking at all the list of how we allocated resources, that, and I would imagine that's going to be for next year. But I think that as we go through the strategic plan, we're going to see whether those stay the same or how they're going to change and how we allocate. What I would really like to see going into it is that, you know, we've been talking about from 0 to 18. And what I really think that we got to talk about is how I've always looked at it. You know, there's going to be kind of we don't want to lose ground on some children, and we want generational changes, you know, for children. And I really think that's how we phrase all this, not 0 to 18. And that's how we ought to look at as far as how we do the budget. I mean, the after-school programs, there may be some individuals that makes it a generational change, but for the most part, I see the after-school program, and I'm a huge advocate for making sure the children have something to do. But I don't see that that's probably going to be generational in scope. But it's still important, because long term, after I'm well gone, what I hope this is all going to do is the children will get what they need. And the after school programs will be kind of enhancing, but they already got what they need, and this will be an opportunity to keep them not only occupied, but maybe enhance their ability to see different inputs in life. And I know that that's a few years down the road, but I really, it's taken a while, and see the tractor is good for something. Get to think about these things, and I think that the way we've been handling this, our discussions could be different, and I think it eliminates some of the conflict that's been there. And that it's we don't want children to lose ground, and we want to what was the express change to them. We want generation as we go forward, and I think that'll be during the strategic plan. The other thing I need to discuss, and I don't know whether it's a strategic plan or whether it's just the board, is what are we going to do long term for a meeting place? Are we going to do we still want to discuss buying a building, and or we do we rent the buildings, or what are we going to do? Because I think we have kind of look at what's the county going to do? Do we want to possibly look at partnering with them? But I'm not sure that the county is doing what they originally what we talked about. As far as they talked about putting up a building in the where the existing building is.
Maybe. So that's out at So that's out as an RFP. It's being extended because we have not done enough community engagement, and so there is still the opportunity for the downtown administration building to be redone or lots in, and we won't really have direction on that.
Well, I think we need to discuss, what are we going to do long term, as far as, does this work? And it's definitely not going to work if there's something controversial. We have to have another meeting for this, or what we want to do. Because if we're actually going to put the building up, it's $1 million enough. And I don't think it is. So now, for the economy, some happens to the economy, as it builds back up, maybe $1 million is enough, but this is probably not enough for what we want to do. Depending on what counties, obviously, is they have auditorium, and so you have a meeting spot. And whether or not that pro is enough, is something that I think we as a board discuss. So somewhere in the future, we need to talk about that, and have a conversation about what we want to do. Because we talked about it, we had some discussion, and then we really haven't talked about it. And I don't think this building is probably long run is the answer. Personally.
In my opinion, I don't think so either. Internally, we did have some plans about figuring out how to make it work. I actually have a meeting with Superintendent Becker tomorrow, just for him to catch me up to speed on what they're thinking about doing with the building. But purchasing the building can't be Mr. Things to worry about. But I agree, we do need the space, and whatever space we purchase, having access to, meeting space and audio, because our providers come to trainings and things like that.
And preferably parking.
And money.
I don't think parking works, for very many people.
So I'm gonna bring us back to the budget piece of this for right now.
Well, that was kind of a.
It is kind of budget, I mean, I think it will end up being part of what we do with the reserves, whether $1 million is not enough to do it.
Right.
And I think it's definitely part of the planning process. Cheryl, do you want
I
to?
have one more question.
Oh, sorry.
If we went to roll back, how much would it reduce the budget?
I think we need to wait until June 1st to get that information.
Just on-
And
we
then
get that.
until we will have all of that. And
Because there's been a lot of buildings, so I don't know that it would be a tremendous loss if we went back to roll back, or something less than the goal of 5 million, especially if it ends up being closer to 9%. Throw it out there.
Stranger.
Yes, ma'am. Back to the budget, 2.3 and 2.4. So I would just share that my opinion is probably we need to look at those. Certainly, I'm sure we have lots of folks with special needs, a lot of children. I'm not sure because I'm the newest on the board, what we've done in that area, how we determine how to support special needs, particularly young students, because we don't want them to not be supported early prior to arriving to school. So maybe somebody could give me some insight on that. And then certainly with the literacy and academic supports, I see those kind of going hand in hand. But I think we need to take a deep dive into special needs. We have a lot of students with special needs in our public school system, so I'm sure they're out there preschool. And maybe I'm off base and that's not where we're at. I'm not sure what we've done there.
We've not done anything really specifically aimed at special, that's targeted to that population. Are there other board comments before I kind of come in?
Are you done?
Yes, sir.
I want to respond to Lee. Yeah, so I'm glad you're on the track, because I'm with you on that 100%. I like that don't leave kids behind and generational change. Because what we have right now is we are funding most of the don't leave kids behind. And so if you're saying in the future, we need to readjust this, I'm with you 100%. Are you saying for this budget cycle? Or
No, I think it's too far.
you're saying in the strategic plan? Yeah, because if you look at kind of the details of that 4.6 million, we've got 3 million, 1 million for after school and 2 million for summer allocation. And I would very much, and I would argue, Superintendent Andrews, that part of that summer allocation was trying to keep literacy from falling down. So maybe that amount could be moved down into that goal if we look at kind of some of the programs. But I agree with you that, to Commissioner Pinkison's point, kind of don't leave the kids behind is that after school and that summer. And I would like to see more funds of that 4.6 moved into what Superintendent Andrews said. But for this budget cycle, I would like to see an increase in the other 3 goals of where we are. If that means we have to cut back a little bit on the middle one, I'm willing to do that. If it means that with the additional ad valorem, that we have that money or more fund balance, I'm okay with that too. I just want us I don't want to approve of, I'm not going to approve it. I'm not going to vote for a budget. It doesn't put more money in goals 3, 4, and I'm not sure about 1 because I haven't heard from the providers on that. If we expanded some funding there, what would that mean for maybe having another nurse practitioner for visits or, I just don't know about those things, so. But you're more talking long-term.
Correct.
I'm with you 100%.
Just throw that in the share.
Um,
Now, what I'm very hopeful for is through the listening project, the conversation we have around this table will change because we will be responding to what the community is on. It's a very different conversation than what I think we've been doing for the last year or two. I think we've been responding to higher level people versus actual residents and families. And so, to me, I think this listening project is going to be a game changer when we're looking at our.
We're not going to have it by the time we do it, but we're just starting.
I know, and I know it'll be for the next, but I think eventually we'll get there.
I think it's like the number, but, yeah.
So my question, I guess, then would be, because we've approved the after school and, and the summer programs, that's already in the budget, so in order to satisfy we have to go into the fund balance. Is that correct?
I think it's a combination. I think we're gonna have a higher number than 6%. We'll have to go into fund balance. And fund balance is pretty big. It's really, really good. And so the discussion, I feel like you and I are gonna have the fund balance and we'll see the impact of that. But I just don't want these numbers to be where they are.
I totally agree. The only problem that we run into, obviously, is, when you go into fund balance, it's not reoccurring. And we're spending on reoccurring dollars. So, that's
Go ahead. Christine, how hard would you walk up people's profiles and
The after school,
the phone profiles? A couple meetings ago. The team pulled together in terms of what's been the return on investment for funding.
the bodies report.
Bodies. I think the only others pulled it all together.
So, yeah, it was what Bonnie presented. I think it's the
I think
emerging and the mastering and okay, so she's talking about.
But I just mean, just an update about how you all feel this program from the allocation.
So they-
went out first, the 200,000 for Children's Home Society. I have to grow the TPD one. I think that's what Dr. Burke was asking for, and I was my last evaluation that I filled out wasn't in. Just think that would be helpful for us to think about.
So they are now conducting those site visits. I believe the ones for the after school programs have been completed, but all the continuation programs, they are in the process of doing that. I don't think they'll be ready by the first June meeting. I can get with the team to see if that's doable.
I was just wondering if folks thought that would be helpful to kind of take a snapshot.
whether they're doing what they.
Yeah.
We gave direction that they're gonna bring that back to us.
The after school ones, yes.
Yeah, and why?
Yeah.
But not the number five.
Not the budget files. Now, we are working, because we met with Dr. Hart, and Mia is working on a plan to bring back more snapshots. Because we have right now about 60 programs. And so we would maybe 1 month focus on health, the next month focus on education. So we're putting a plan together to be able to bring back that information more often with more. So I can get with the team to see about the other programs that are now after school, because they are now. We're also updating early in contract negotiations for expanding the after school programs. So we'll put a plan together to see what's.
Anybody else from the? I don't think again it has to be real detailed, but I think it would help, particularly the diversified conversation, right? Really this.
Any other board before I answer the genre on kind of my thoughts about some of this as I've been listening? I hear what you're saying. My pushback on it a little bit is how we got here with this disproportionate allocation. And we've done to do that planning. And so and once we funded, then we have created this expectation for ongoing funding. I think, I get it, trust me, I would love to see a ton of money. So, personal bias, admitted to, I would love to see that, but I think a few things. I think we need to have a better sense, and one of the things that I think we need as part of the strategic plan, the data side of it, is some of what Dr. Snyder was talking about. If things are happening in Tallahassee that could provide funding that you know about those, what's that environmental scan tell us about what's coming down the pipe? There's tons of money coming from mental health. Where's it coming from? Who's going to be eligible? What kinds of services are going to be eligible? And then what is the community perception of need before we start to do reallocation between these pots, especially if you're going to do that by dipping into reserves and creating an expectation that we're then not going to be able to fund on an ongoing basis. So I would really caution us, as much as we want to jump in and provide for all these needs that we know are out there, not to get ourselves back into a situation where now we've got even more pots that we funded prior to planning. I'd be interested in knowing to Mr. Andrews' question, are our existing after school or other providers seeing special needs kids? And we're just not counting because we don't know, we haven't asked that question. There may be kids that are special needs in those programs. And I can tell you that when I volunteered last year at the Stokes summer program teaching Spanish, I didn't expect 3 kids on the spectrum in the group, but there were. And definitely their needs were being met in terms of how people were intervening and interacting with them. So I think we need a little bit of just cautionary before we start saying, oh, we've got more money than we think. Let's plan about it. Let's take a look at whether what we're funding works. If some of it, as we decide, isn't working and we don't want to continue it, reallocating that is one thing. But I really think we need to we said we were going to take a pause to plan, and I can't emphasize enough how important I think that is. So we'll have some lively debate, I suspect. We've had rollback and versus debate. We'll have some of this plan versus just allocate some debate. But I do want us to be mindful about it, because once you put it out there, it is very difficult to take back.
Yeah, and if I can just add, just to clarify, when we talk about birth to five, we're not just talking about the right?
Right.
Like the ELC, right? We're talking about
Health,
and
the nursing
mental health,
orientation,
and
and all of
family
that.
support,
Yeah.
what it takes to really build a comprehensive system, that we can talk about.
Sure.
So I hear what you're saying. And I get this idea that once we fund something, there's an expectation. Even when we say, don't have any expectations, this is a one-time thing. I think though, as a small, new organization, it's better to put the funding in the community and say, it's one time until we finish our planning, and get something out there working and deal with that other thing, well, this should be recurring, then to hold it in fund balance. And I hear exactly what you're saying. I will tell you that for the first time, as we are now having joint meetings in the small cities, Walter, Hawthorne, we're going out to the county, not to trust the county, we're going out to Liberty today. I am hearing the citizens talk about how wonderful the trust programming is, which is year 2 or 3. So we needed to put that money out there. And I am unapologetic about the fact that it may not be recurring because we're trying to get it into the community. And even though we did all that, we still have a huge fund. And that to me is a bigger, gosh, why are you not using that money? Even if it's not going to be long term, then the angst of, well, now I expect. Well, you shouldn't expect, because it's one time. And I'm sorry that now you expect it, but we're actually evaluating who's using the money the best. And maybe focus there instead of on what your expectations are. And so I hear what you're saying. I absolutely do. But we're small. We gotta be able to move quickly and adjust. And so I don't want to just say we have to plan, and not deploy. And I know that's not what you're saying. I know that's not what you're saying, but when you have a really big fund balance, the public also sees that.
Yeah, I hear that. I do hear that. And as I do hear it when I'm out and about in the community, I know what it's like. I agree. You say one time and you say, read my minute. One time, and it never gets.
Well, but I mean, my point is that even before we had a full board, we set the 5 weeks. And we knew that we were going to catch all that heat. But I think had we not done that, by this summer, I think maybe people wouldn't be saying, we're seeing the trust, we're actually seeing it. It takes time. And so I took responsibility for that. And I said, look, y'all, everybody blame me. I'm the one who pushed it. That's fine. But I'm really glad we did that because now we're starting to get some traction. And I think it's going to be the same way with mental health and safety and literacy. And look, there is a mental health and safety crisis that we are hearing at the county commission. No, they're hearing it here. And I know you're hearing it at Meridian. And so if that means we have to say,
He is over, he is in the back room.
I know, but what my point here is, and I'll stop and I won't delay it anymore. My point is that if we say, look, we're going to put some money into trying to address some immediate needs of mental health, knowing that it may not be long term where we change the rate, I have no problem with it. No.
And I don't think it's a large.
Yeah, I know. So I think maybe to what Cheryl was saying a bit ago, maybe the approach we could take is to say we're going to set aside some money. Yeah. And once the list, we could do budget amendments to move it into more precise pots. Once we've heard from providers and from community members and from the school folks that get the kids all day, try to hang on to them all day, that have these needs.
Yeah, I want placeholders. I don't want to determine the program. That's why I said $1 million at the top, $1 million for the bottom 2, and then 4 in the middle. I'm looking kind of at that high level. Is that something that we should be thinking about before we approve the final budget? And then, yeah, I don't think we need.
And I think at least from Rosie, we're going to figure out situation. That's my last. I think if $1 million is not enough, and we don't know where the county is going to go, do we bracket more than that? Because construction is what, that 250 square foot right now?
Or I think there's still an opportunity to push pretty hard with the county and say, look, you're county-wide. We are county-wide. We want to be there. We want to be county commissioners. We want you all to coordinate with us our facilities because we want to grow the trust capabilities of the public. So we're going to want to use the auditorium, use the meeting spaces, but our staffing needs we need X number of square. Put that in our.
So let me see if I can give Christy and Nicole some clear direction on where we want to go with this. This is not for approval today. This is for staffing. So what I'm hearing is that we'd like for you to bring back something that reallocates the programmatic dollars a little bit along the lines. Commissioner Cornell was just indicating is that, do we have consensus that that's direction we want to give to staff?
But we've already approved,
We're talking for next, this is next year for how we distribute the language and programmatic expenses. And including if we need to, a proposal to use some fund balance for that. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's the only way we can be able to, we have a $300 that we can allocate, and we can still use it.
That's what now I just want to make sure that, because I want to have,
I can put a motion on the floor that
because I'm confused. So the contracts that we approved, were they multi-year contracts?
Yes.
Okay, so how much of that was multi-year because we made a commitment to that middle block. So how much is that commitment before we start, unless we're going to the fund balance?
We would have to go.
Okay.
We have already approved that those contracts we would be for the next 2 years.
Okay.
I don't need, my opinion, if I could, is I don't feel like I need to make a motion to get staff direction to finalize the budget and move these things out until we hear from the June 1st number. And we have some more discussion about that 750 that's in that part.
Okay, so you don't feel like we need to change anything?
So I'm just telling this board that before we approve the budget, I may make an amendment, I may make a motion at that time that we, I mean, I want to give Lee a chance to try to put the people back. I mean, I think we do.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I want to make sure staff in here was a clear understanding of what it is we.
I want them to know where I'm standing. I don't know the rest of the board. But that's why.
So right now then,
For me, it's more fun balance, it's using this unallocated, it's the additional ad valorem, and it's fund balance to put more money. in.
so by June 1st, and they'll get that June 1st, we will meet again. June 13th, June 13th. So maybe, so Ken, is it then that put that into the budget and we can then have discussions about how to use it?
I mean, the way I'm looking at this is we've got 300 unallocated, we got maybe another 250 coming in of ad valorem. We have this discussion about 750. And we have a discussion about fund balance.
So the fund balance, we kind of know, it's a static number right now,
So
right?
that's a big number.
It's a big number, but I'm just trying to think, again, I'm trying to think in terms of workload and direction. So June 13th, and what we want to see is what these numbers look like with the new tax estimate and the 300 and the resolution on where that 750 lands in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, Lee, from my perspective, fund balance is one time expense, build it one time.
Yeah, that's why I think.
I'd rather use that fund balance for that discussion than to recurring for the unallocated.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
And if it's, if the fund balance is so big, and another building is gonna be expensive, we ought to go ahead and bite the bullet while the fund balance is big.
I got it.
All right, any other discussion on this topic? Do we need to have a motion for staff? Do we need, Bob, do we have to approve something today? So we need a motion. I am so glad that as a chair, I can't make one at this moment.
Chris, what would you like to see in a motion?
Well, that's a great question.
I realize that, there are areas, there are goals, that we have, established for several years now, that we're not providing services. I would like for us to at least be able to, see what program ideas are in our county that we could be supporting.
So would a good motion be to send back to staff, to bring back areas that staff feels is sufficient that we could, look to funding, in the next budget cycle? As well?
And the reason I'm saying no is because I do not think we'll have time to do that between now and the next meeting. Because the meeting might be 2 weeks away, but the board packet has to be out within the next week. However, I am perfectly fine sitting down with Nicole and looking at what we're going to get in June, using these $300,000 and then coming back to figure out if we just tap into fund balance to do the things that Commissioner Cornell is suggesting.
Well, so, yeah, so what I would move is that we approve the preliminary budget as presented, as preliminary. That in a future meeting prior to the adoption of the budget, that staff bring back to us what the actual ad valorem will be. And that staff move the unallocated portion into either goal 1, 3, or 4, but not identify programming yet, so that we have time to do that. That's part 1. Part 2 is that staff get with the county to discuss facilities and bring back some potential options of how we could use that 750 if we're not going to move forward with this building, and fund balance to come up with a permanent facility. And then part 3 would be that staff look at the after school and summer allocation programming, which is that $3 million, and identify any of those programs address strategy 2.3 and 2.4. So that we know really what that allocation of funds is addressing to superintendent. And I think some of the after school and some of them might actually be addressing literacy and improve capacity to support special needs. If it's not, then in my mind, those two strategies may be additional funding, like goal 1, 3.
When you ask what the impact would be.
And part 4 would be for staff to tell us what the dollar impact would be from moving from 5.0 to 1.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That's a motion. Do you have a second? We have a motion, we have a second. Do you have any discussion on the motion before I open it to public comment?
That makes sense?
The one question that I had for Jim is, when you were talking about the summer programs and the after school program, which is 5 something.
That was 3.
But for both the after school and the summer program.
So it's 3 million. After school allocation 1 million, summer school allocation 2 million.
Okay, and how, part of the issue is, are we approved, we approved those contracts, they will 2 years.
Right.
So we're locked into that, but some amount, carry going forward. So the request that you made about, there were 2 other policies that we haven't totally fulfilled, that you had a question about, and one question. What financial impact would be a result of that as we come back and have another discussion?
Well, I think what's
You came up with, you said a million here, and some other numbers were here.
Oh, so what, in my first conversation, I was just saying on this sheet that we talked about, right now, we're budgeting 4.6 million for that goal. And I'm fine with it. I'm not saying let's cut all of it. But what I'm saying is I feel like we need to have another 2 million budgeted to the other 3 goals. Right, which is goal 1, goal 3, and goal 4. And right now, we have 687, we have 420 and 75. So we have basically $1.2 million budget. And for me, I think we need more funds for those. But this is a Maggie discussion. Do we spend before we spend? Right. And so I'm prepared to force that. But
We can have some lively, robust discussion.
but I'd rather us put something in those categories unallocated, so that we can tell the public we're looking at that in our budget instead of not having.
Just to let you know, I kind of include the teamwork program in the summer program.
Yeah, I agree. So I view that as we're not leaving kids behind. Versus
Other more discussion on that. Yeah. Public comment on this motion. Any public comment on this motion? Hearing none, back to us. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? All right.
You have for staff and.
No, I appreciate actually hearing from staff that if, pushing back on us with time frames that we're giving you. It's important for us to know what can realistically happen. It's easy for us to say, whereas you guys have to do it. So I always hope that you will be bringing that back to us as unrealistic. So please always feel free to do that. Do we have any old business that has not already come up? Any new business that needs to come before us? All right, any final board member comments before we adjourn?
I do want to just reiterate, thank you, Liz, first of all, for being out of Hawthorne. Yeah, are you going to be break now? Oh, I'm sorry. There you are. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being out of Hawthorne. You are going to be there? So it's it's our 3rd joint meeting. So at the Waldo and at the Hawthorne meeting, we're we're starting to hear from folks about the work of the trusted board and how it's impactful in their cities. And I really appreciate you being there and being available. I just want to say to the board, I think it's beginning to get a little bit of traction. I'm not ready to say that, you know, it's a major fight, it's a great success, but when you have a mayor of Hawthorne talk without prompting, I didn't even say it, about how impactful the work that Chrissy and the staff have done to provide summer funding for their kids. And, you know, we got the book we're talking about, and that's really, really good. It's really what we need. So thank you for that. And keep going to those small city meetings, because it's important for at least trying. That was my.
Any other comments from any member of the board? I do want to echo that you guys are everywhere. I'm always liking or retweeting or doing something and pictures and have pictures of the trust staff. And not just during the work week. I mean, you guys are putting your hearts and souls. You're out there on Saturdays. Love seeing your daughter behind the table. You know, it's really, I think, a real testament to how committed you guys are to the work. So I want to acknowledge that. Thank you for doing that. I think we are adjourned.
What do y'all think?